They said my silence was guilt, but they never understood that sometimes words hurt more than silence itself. This is my story, the story of how I almost lost everything simply for being exactly who I am. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 19 years old, and I live in Salem, Oregon, a city that prides itself on being the state capital, yet has never truly understood who I am. Every morning, I wake up at exactly 6:47, not 6:45, not 6:50, 6:47. That time was calculated 3 years ago, when I worked out the exact minutes I needed to complete my entire morning routine without rushing, but also without wasting a single second. My mom, Sarah, always says, "Marcus, you're more punctual than Big Ben." And I always reply that Big Ben is in London, England, not in Oregon, United States, and that its precision is actually inferior to modern atomic clocks. She laughs whenever I say that. I never fully understood why, but I've learned her laughter is affectionate, not mocking. The difference is measurable. Affectionate laughter lasts between 2.3 and 3.7 seconds. While mocking laughter is either shorter or unnaturally prolonged. Salem has 175,535 residents, according to the most recent census I memorized. I also know our house is exactly 1,847 meters from Willamette University. That it takes me 847 steps to reach the public library when I maintain my standard walking pace. And that there are exactly 23 traffic lights between our house and downtown. Numbers calm me because they are absolute, immutable, and like people, who shift moods and behaviors in ways my brain is still trying to map after 19 years of intensive observation. "Marcus, your coffee's getting cold," my mom calls from the kitchen. It's 7 hours 15 minutes and 32 seconds. She's on time today. She always makes coffee at 7:15, always in the same navy blue mug my dad, David, used before he died in a car accident exactly 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days ago. The crash happened on a rainy Friday at 6:23 p.m. at the intersection of Lancaster Drive and Center Street. A drunk driver ran a red light at approximately 40 miles per hour in a 30 zone. I can't bring myself to use my dad's mug. His scent is still there, molecularly speaking, traces of his cologne, the natural oils of his hands, the soap he used. My hypersensitive sense of smell detects those aromatic layers even years later, and they trigger a cascade of sensory memories that make my head pound and my stomach twist. I head down the stairs, counting each step 15 in total, with the third creaking slightly due to a loose nail my mom has never fixed. She says it's not a priority, but for me, that specific 0.7 second creak is a daily disruption to my sensory system. The sound vibrates at approximately 440 Hz, coincidentally the same frequency as the A above middle C on a piano. My mom is in the kitchen wearing the green sweater, which means she's worried about something. Over the past 6 years, I've developed a classification system for her sweaters based on correlations between color and emotional state. Green equals worry, light blue equals calm, red equals irritation or rush, brown equals nostalgia or melancholy. She owns 43 sweaters in total. Yes, I count her down. She wears each one in patterns that perfectly reflect her psychological state, though she has no idea her behavior follows such a system. Good morning, Mom. It's 7 hours, 16 minutes and 14 seconds. You're 74 seconds late compared to the standard coffee schedule, I say. sitting in my specific chair, the second one to the left, at the 6-seat dining table we bought when I was 12. That chair is positioned to give me a full view of the kitchen and the front entrance, reducing my anxiety about unexpected changes or surprises. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" She kisses the top of my head, a gesture she's repeated every morning for at least 8 years. I flinch slightly, not because I don't love her. Quite the opposite, but because hair kisses create a tingling sensation that spreads across my scalp and down my neck, causing an involuntary reflex I classify as uncomfortable yet tolerable when it comes from her. I slept exactly 7 hours and 23 minutes. My smartwatch recorded 4 REM cycles, an average heart rate of 89 beats per minute, and a body temperature of 97.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I woke up twice, once at 2:34 because the neighbor's dog barked 47 times in a row, and once at 4:12 because I dreamed again about the interrogation. Mom stops stirring the sugar into her coffee, always 3 level teaspoons. Always clockwise. Exactly 17 circular motions. You're still having nightmares about that. Technically, they're not nightmares, Mom. Nightmares are unreal dream sequences based on irrational fears. What I experience are traumatic neural reconnections, reprocessing actual memories of real events that happened. The difference is significant from a neuroscientific standpoint. She sighs. It's sigh number 3 in my personal classification, worry mixed with sadness, lasting an average of 3.2 seconds with a descending tone. "Marcus, it's been 6 months and 4 days. Detective Morrison said it was a terrible misunderstanding. You don't have to carry this anymore." But I do, I always do. My autistic brain can't just let it go the way neurotypical people suggest, so icily. It's like asking someone to voluntarily forget how to breathe or how to make their heart beat. Traumatic memories are stored in high definition in my neurological system, accessible at any sensory or emotional trigger. "I'm going for my morning walk," I announce, finishing my coffee and grabbing my dark blue jacket, the only one in my wardrobe that doesn't make noise when I move. The fabric is 100% cotton, with no metal zippers or Velcro, materials that produce sounds I find unbearable. "Marcus." Mom calls as I reach the door, using tone of voice number 6 in my classification parental guidance mixed with anxiety. "Remember what we talked about eye contact, okay?" I nod automatically, but keep my eyes fixed on the floor. Direct eye contact feels like staring into the sun, technically possible, but neurologically painful and unnecessary for effective communication. When I force eye contact, I lose about 60% of my ability to process the verbal content of a conversation, because I'm expending too much mental energy just tolerating the sensory intensity of someone's gaze. The walk to the library is, without question, my favorite part of the day. In Salem, the streets are laid out in a modified grid pattern that makes perfect logical sense, completely different from Portland, which is an urban chaos that triggers my anxiety just by imagining it. My route never changes. I leave the house at 8:30 a.m., walk exactly 847 meters down Court Street, turn left on State Street, then go straight for another 1,200 meters until I reach the Salem Public Library. Total time, 18 minutes and 34 seconds, factoring in crosswalk signals and my steady pace of 3 miles per hour. During this walk, my brain runs multiple processing routines at once. I count my steps, track traffic patterns, notice architectural or landscaping changes, analyze human behavior, and run complex math calculations, all to keep my mind anchored in ordered data. Sometimes, people stare at me. I can feel it physically, like small heated needles on my skin. 2 months and 3 days ago, a woman in her mid-40s told her friend, "There goes the weird kid." Weird, that word has followed me since childhood like a ghost I can never quite shake. In elementary school, I was the weird kid who knows everything about dinosaurs. In high school, the weird kid who corrects math teachers. Now, at 19, I'm simply the weird kid, as if my weirdness has become my only defining trait to the outside world. The Salem Public Library is a building from 1912, renovated in 1987 and 2003, holding 34,567 cataloged volumes, 127 public computers, and 89 study tables spread across 3 floors. Arrival time, 8 hours, 48 minutes and 26 seconds a.m. Well within my acceptable margin of error of plus or minus 30 seconds. Good morning, Martha. Current outdoor temperature, 54.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 78%. Probability of precipitation within the next 6 hours, 85%, based on cloud formations I observed during my walk. Martha Jenkins, 67, a librarian for 34 years, is one of only 3 people in Salem who truly understand me. She never tells me to speak quieter or asks why I need to sit at the same table every day. Good morning, Marcus. Your favorite books are on the usual table, and 3 new science volumes came in that you might like. Martha understands routine, patterns, consistency. She knows I mean table number 14, the third in the second row, near the east-facing window, but not directly under the sunlight that creates disruptive glare on book pages. The table is exactly 120 centimeters by 80 centimeters, 74 centimeters high, and placed 12 feet from the nearest reference shelf. Today I'm studying the criminal justice system, an irony that doesn't escape me, considering my recent traumatic experience. But I need to understand it in a structured, logical way, because emotionally processing what happened is still beyond my neurological capacity. The book I'm reading is Criminal Justice System, an overview by Larry J. Siegel, page 247. The criminal justice system occasionally fails innocent people, particularly those from vulnerable populations who may be misunderstood by law enforcement due to atypical behaviors or communication styles. Atypical behaviors. That's an academic euphemism for people like me. It was a Tuesday when my life permanently changed. March 15th, 2:23 p.m., 52 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy. I was on my afternoon walk, a secondary routine I developed to balance my need for physical exercise with my need for environmental observation. My afternoon route differs from the morning. From the library I head down Liberty Street, pass through Riverfront Park, continue along Front Street to the Westfield Salem Center Mall, and return via Commercial Street. Total distance, 2.6 miles. Duration, 52 minutes. That day, as I approached the mall, I saw flashing police lights, 4 patrol cars, all with blue and red strobes flickering at slightly different frequencies, a visual cacophony that spiked my anxiety level from 3 to 7 on a scale of 10. My analytical curiosity overpowered my social anxiety, so I approached cautiously, keeping about 50 feet from the perimeter of police activity. "Excuse me, son," a male voice called out. I turned and saw a man about 6 feet tall, 210 pounds, graying hair, uniform identifying him as a detective. Detective Morrison, Salem Police Department. Do you come through here often? Yes, sir. Every day except Sundays, from 2 o'clock to 3:23 p.m. As part of my afternoon routine of exercise and environmental observation. It's an essential component of my daily self-regulation structure. He jotted something in a small brown leather notebook. Pretty specific routine, huh? And were you here last night, around 10 p.m.? No, sir. Last night, Monday, at exactly 10 p.m., I was home watching Deep Ocean, Mysteries of the Pacific on National Geographic. Specifically, I was at the segment on cephalopods, marine mollusks with tentacles and advanced intelligence, including octopuses, which have 3 hearts and blue blood due to hemocyanin. The detective gave me a long look, 7.3 seconds of direct eye contact, which I endured by focusing on his forehead, a technique I use to simulate eye contact without the sensory overload. His expression showed what I classified as confusion mixed with suspicion. All right. Very detailed information. And do you know Jennifer Walsh? Young girl, brown hair, 17 years old, student at South Salem High? I know her from observational data. Jennifer Walsh, approximately 5 feet 3, 115 to 120 pounds. Dark brown hair with golden highlights. She always sits in the 3rd seat on the left side of the Route 11 bus. 7:47 a.m. schedule. She uses pink Sony headphones, model WHCH710N, and often reads fantasy literature, predominantly the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. She also wears a silver bracelet with a crescent moon charm, and has the habit of lightly biting the left side of her lower lip when focused on reading. The silence that followed lasted exactly 8.7 seconds, long enough for me to recognize I had made a significant social mistake. And how exactly do you know all these details about her, Marcus? That was the moment I realized my first critical error in the interaction. For me, noticing behavioral patterns and memorizing details is as natural and involuntary as breathing. My autistic brain processes visual and behavioral data in hyperfocus, cataloging what I consider relevant to understanding my environment. But to neurotypical people, that level of observation can seem invasive, obsessive, even threatening. I notice patterns naturally. That's how my brain processes environmental information. It's not intentional or directed specifically at I do this with everyone in my regular field of observation. What kind of patterns do you notice in other people? Commuting routines, seat preferences, reading habits, clothing patterns, mood indicators based on body language, frequency of social interactions. I stopped when I saw his expression shift to something I couldn't fully decode, but instinctively knew was problematic. Marcus, have you ever spoken directly to Jennifer Walsh? No, sir. Our routines only overlap visually during the morning bus ride. I've never initiated verbal or physical contact with her, but you do watch her regularly. I observe everyone who is part of my routine environment. That's how I maintain social orientation and detect potential changes or threats. The detective wrote down more notes. His body language holders slightly tense, brows furrowed, posture leaning forward signaled rising investigative interest. Marcus, have you noticed anything unusual involving Jennifer Walsh recently? Anything outside the patterns you just described? That's when I made my second critical error. Yes, sir. Last Thursday, at 4:34 p.m. I observed Jennifer Walsh in what appeared to be an intense argument with an unidentified male in the parking lot of the Westfield Salem Center. The interaction lasted approximately 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Their body language indicated significant emotional conflict. Can you describe the man? Male, Caucasian, approximately 6'1", estimated weight 165 to 175 pounds. Dark, wavy hair, visible tattoo on his left forearm, black tribal pattern. Wearing a dark denim jacket, white t-shirt, black sneakers. Estimated age 20 to 25. Very detailed again. Did you hear what they were arguing about? Distance prevented clear auditory comprehension of exact words, but tone of voice and body language suggested a personal relationship with emotional complications, possibly romantic, given their initial physical proximity before the conflict escalated. And you don't know this guy, correct? He is not part of my routine observations of the area. That was the first time I registered him in this environment. And why didn't you mention this earlier? You hadn't asked me about observations specifically related to Jennifer Walsh until now. That's when I realized something fundamental in the detective's expression. He wasn't neutrally collecting information. He was building a case. And I, unknowingly, was feeding him details that could easily be misinterpreted as suspicious. Marcus, I need you to come with me to the station for a more detailed conversation. Am I legally obligated to accompany you? Not at this moment, but it would be very helpful for our investigation. My brain processed the implications instantly. Refusing could appear suspicious. Agreeing could put me in a vulnerable position without proper legal representation. But my compulsion to cooperate with authority and my naive belief in systemic justice overpowered my self-preservation instincts. All right, but I need to inform my mother about the change in my routine. Of course, you can call her from the station.
I was at the kitchen table, with piles of 8th grade math tests spread out around me, when my phone rang. It was 3:23 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started out absolutely normal. The number flashing on the screen was listed as Salem Police Department, something I never imagined I'd see on my caller ID. My first thought was accident. Marcus had been hit by a car during his walk. Or someone had tried to hurt him. There are cruel people out there who target individuals they perceive as different or vulnerable. Hello. My voice came out more tense than I intended. Mrs. Chen. This is Detective Morrison, Salem Police Department. I need you to come down to the station. It's about your son, Marcus. The words left my mouth before I could even process the fear swelling in my chest. What happened? Is he hurt? Did he get injured? Did someone attack him? No, ma'am. Marcus is not physically hurt. But we need to speak with you regarding some issues connected to an ongoing investigation. It would be best if we discussed it in person. What kind of investigation? I'd prefer to explain once you're here, Mrs. Chen. Marcus is safe, but it's important you come as soon as possible. 23 minutes. That's how long it took me to drive to the Liberty Street station, operating in a state of controlled panic. During those 23 minutes, my mind raced through every imaginable scenario. Had Marcus witnessed a crime? Had someone falsely accused him of something? Had he unintentionally gotten himself entangled in some sort of trouble? Marcus has high-functioning autism, a term I dislike because it implies there are low forms of autism, as if neurodivergence existed in some kind of hierarchy. He is brilliant, capable of living relatively independently, but in complex social situations, especially under stress or pressure, his ability to navigate collapses completely. The Salem Police Department is housed in a 1970s red brick building, with brutally functional architecture and no consideration for visual or sensory comfort. I found Marcus sitting in a blue plastic chair in the reception area, performing his characteristic self-regulation movement, rocking his torso back and forth at a steady rhythm. Approximately 40 movements per minute. "Mom," he said when he saw me. And there was something different in his voice. Smaller, younger. Afraid in a way I hadn't heard since he was 12 years old. And got lost in the mall for 40 minutes. "Marcus, sweetheart, are you okay?" Instinctively, I placed myself between him and the detective who was a Puccina. Maternal reflex of protection I didn't even realize I had until I was already doing it. "Mrs. Chen, thank you for coming. I'm Detective Morrison." He was a man in his 50s, with the tired look of someone who had seen too many bad things in life. "May we talk in private? I prefer Marcus to be present. He has the right to hear anything related to him, of course." "Let's move to a more private room." The more private room was a standard interrogation room. Metal table, 4 chairs, one-way mirror, and fluorescent lighting that buzzed steadily at 60 Hz, the exact kind of environment that maximizes Marcus's sensory anxiety. "Mrs. Chen, a high school student, went missing last night. Jennifer Walsh, 17. Your son was seen in the area where she was last spotted, and when we spoke with him, he demonstrated very detailed knowledge of the girl's habits and routines." I felt my stomach sink like a stone into dark water. "Detailed knowledge how?" Marcus began to speak, his voice shifting into the monotone, precise tone he adopts when he's neurologically overloaded. "I said that Jennifer Walsh sits in the 3rd seat of the bus. Route 11, reads Harry Potter books, uses pink Sony WHCH710N headphones, and wears a silver bracelet with a crescent moon charm. I also mentioned that I observed an argument between her and an unknown man last Thursday. But I didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I only answered the questions they asked me." Detective Morrison continued. "Your son also provided an extremely detailed description of the man he claims to have seen arguing with Jennifer Walsh. Full physical description, clothing details, even estimates of weight and height." "Detective Morrison," I interrupted, my voice taking on the tone I use when I have to defend my students against unsympathetic teachers. "My son is on the autism spectrum. Observing behavioral patterns and memorizing visual details isn't a choice for him, it's his brain's default operating system. He does this with everyone in his environment, not specifically with this girl." "I understand, ma'am. But the girl is missing, and your son had very specific information about her and about a possible conflict situation. Detective Marcus is 19, but in terms of social navigation and grasp of implications, he often functions like a much younger child. If he had information about something dangerous or criminal, he would tell me immediately. He cannot keep secrets, or lie, literally cannot. His brain doesn't work that way." "Mrs. Chen, may I ask some questions about Marcus's routine? Where was he last night?" "At home with me. He got back from the library at 3:30 p.m., as always. We had dinner at 6. Watched a marine life documentary at 7:30. He went to bed at 9:45, like he has every Monday for at least 2 years. Can you confirm that he didn't leave the house between 9 p.m. and midnight?" Detective Morrison, "Marcus hasn't left the house after 9 p.m. on a weekday for literally years. Any change in his nightly routine throws off his entire sleep cycle and causes severe anxiety. He would rather get sick than break his nighttime routine." It was then that I saw something in the detective's eyes that terrified me. There was a quality of determination that suggested he had already drawn his conclusions. Regardless of the logical explanations I was providing, Mrs. Chen, we're going to need Marcus to take a lie detector test. A polygraph. Detective, you do understand that autistic individuals can have atypical physiological responses to questions, even when telling the truth. Social anxiety, sensory overload, difficulty interpreting linguistic nuance, all of that can distort polygraph results. I understand your concerns, but it's standard procedure. Marcus, who had remained relatively quiet throughout the conversation, suddenly spoke. Mom, why do they think I lied? I never lie. Lying requires creating alternative narratives and keeping them consistent over time. My brain can't do that efficiently. Detective Morrison leaned slightly forward. Everybody lies sometimes, Marcus. Small lies, big lies, ... I don't. Marcus interrupted with the brutal frankness that characterizes autistic people. Lying requires specific neurological abilities related to theory of mind and conscious social manipulation. Those functions are compromised in my brain. It is literally harder for me to lie than to tell the truth. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The detective wasn't interested in understanding how my son's brain worked. He had already decided Marcus was a suspect, and he was searching for evidence to confirm his preconceived theory. The polygraph test was scheduled for the next day. That night, Marcus barely slept. He stayed awake, reorganizing his book collection in chronological order of publication, a task he always resorts to when he's extremely anxious and needs control over at least one aspect of his environment. Mom, what if the machine says I'm lying, even when I'm telling the truth? He asked me at 2:34 a.m., standing in my doorway the same way he used to when he was a child and had nightmares. Marcus, the truth is the truth. You did nothing wrong. But what if they can't tell the difference? What if they interpret my neurological patterns as dishonesty? It was a valid concern. Autistic people often display atypical physiological responses to stress, anxiety, and sensory overload. Irregular heartbeats, sweating, muscle tension, all the indicators a polygraph monitors can be triggered by the test situation itself, regardless of the truthfulness of the answers. The next morning, we arrived at the station at 9 a.m. Marcus had followed his morning routine. Precisely coffee at 7:15, walk cancelled due to the schedule change, which already heightened his anxiety, and specific clothes chosen for maximum sensory comfort. The polygraph technician, Mr. Rodriguez, explained the process kindly but clinically. Sensors on the chest, arm, fingers. Marcus asked about the technical specifications of each sensor, way to process anxiety through factual information. The respiration sensor monitors chest expansion using pneumography. The cardiovascular sensor uses photoplasmography to detect changes in blood volume. The skin conductance sensor measures sweat gland activity through microamperage. Mr. Rodriguez explained patiently. Sampling frequency, Marcus asked. 1000 Hz per channel. Statistical margin of error. Approximately 10 to 15% under ideal conditions. I watched Marcus process this information, mentally calculating the implications. For him, understanding the technology reduced the anxiety of the unknown. The questions began simply. Is your name Marcus Chen? Are you 19 years old? Do you live in Salem, Oregon? Control questions to establish physiological baselines. Then came the questions about Jennifer Walsh. Do you know Jennifer Walsh? Yes. Marcus answered with his typical precision. Have you ever spoken with Jennifer Walsh? No. Absolute truth. Were you at the Westfield Salem Center Mall on Monday night? No. Another truth. But when the questions shifted to his detailed observations, I saw the numbers on the polygraph monitor start to fluctuate. Not because Marcus was lying, but because discussing his neurological differences always spiked his anxiety. Do you know more about Jennifer Walsh's disappearance than you've told us? No. But his answer came with a slight delight, the time he needed to process the implications of the question and formulate a neurologically precise response. After 45 minutes, Mr. Rodriguez turned off the equipment. His expression gave nothing away, but I asked to speak with him privately. Mr. Rodriguez, what were the results? Mrs. Chen, the results are inconclusive. There are some indicators of elevated stress during certain questions, but that could just as easily be due to situational anxiety, not dishonesty. So Marcus didn't fail the test. Correct, he didn't fail. But he also didn't definitively pass. Detective Morrison was not satisfied with inconclusive results. Mrs. Chen, will need Marcus to remain available for further questioning. I suggest he not leave town. Detective, my son has neither the resources nor the inclination to leave town. He can barely cope with changes in his daily routine. You're treating an autistic young man as if he were a criminal fugitive. Ma'am, a girl is missing. We have to follow every lead. And what if the main lead is simply a boy who sees the world differently? 3 days passed. Marcus tried to stick to his routine, but I could see the stress building. He began to develop nervous tics, rubbing his hands repeatedly, checking locks multiple times, reorganizing objects into precise geometric patterns. On Friday, at 6:52 a.m., 5 minutes later than Marcus's usual wake-up time, which already signaled it would be a difficult day, they came back.
The sound of the doorbell at 6:52 a.m. created an immediate cognitive dissonance in my nervous system. Doorbell equals unexpected visitor. 6:52 a.m. equals 5 minutes after my standard wake-up time. The combination of these two anomalous factors instantly raised my anxiety level from 2 to 8 on a scale of 10. I heard voices in the living room. My mother's voice, high tension, defensive tone. Male voices I didn't recognize, authoritative, formal, determined. My brain began processing possible scenarios, but every conclusion was rejected by my conscious mind as improbable. Marcus Chen, you are under arrest on suspicion of involvement in the disappearance of Jennifer Walsh. Detective Morrison stood in my doorway, accompanied by 2 other officers I didn't recognize. The sentence took 3.7 seconds for my brain to fully process. Arrested meant restriction of freedom. Suspicion meant insufficient evidence for certainty. Involvement was too vague a term for logical processing. But I wasn't involved in anything related to Jennifer Walsh's disappearance. I responded with the literalness characteristic of my communication pattern. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The Miranda rights continued, but my auditory processing capacity was rapidly decreasing. Sensory overload combined with cognitive shock resulted in what my mother calls a shutdown, a neurological state where my brain essentially shuts down non-essential functions to preserve basic mental energy. My mother began crying. My mother's tears always trigger an intense empathetic response in my nervous system, even when I can't fully process the emotions involved. Marcus, my love, it's going to be okay, she said, but her voice trembled at approximately 8 to 10 hertz, indicating extreme fear. Why are you crying, Mom? I didn't do anything wrong. If I didn't do anything wrong, why would they arrest me? She tried to explain, as they put the handcuffs on me. Cold metal, weighing about 450 grams, restricting movement, and creating immediate claustrophobia. Sometimes the system doesn't work perfectly, Marcus. Sometimes innocent people are accused, until the truth comes out. But that's inefficient and unjust, I replied, applying pure logic to a situation that clearly transcended logic. Yes, my love, it is. The Marion County Jail was built in 1984, renovated in 2010, capacity for 431 inmates. Standard institutional architecture, concrete blocks, steel bars, constant fluorescent lighting, constant ambient noise of approximately 65 to 70 decibels. My sensory processing immediately identified multiple environmental stressors: overlapping odors, industrial disinfectant, human sweat, institutional food, cleaning chemicals, discordant sounds, simultaneous conversations, television, slamming metal doors, mechanical ventilation, abrasive textures, stiff cotton uniforms, thin mattress with synthetic filling, scratchy synthetic wool blanket. Chen, you're in cell 47, the guard told me. Officer Johnson, according to his badge, approximately 5 feet 10, 187 pounds, local Oregon accent. The cell measured exactly 2.4 meters by 3 meters by 2.7 meters high. Metal bed bolted to the wall, stainless steel toilet, small metal table, no window, one cellmate, David Restrepo, 34 years old, incarcerated for a parole violation related to drugs. "Hey kid," David said as I entered. "First time in jail?" "Yes, and hopefully the last, considering I am innocent of the charges that led to my detention." David laughed, category for laugh in my classification. Sardonic humor mixed with disbelief. "Everyone's innocent in here, bro. You'll see. I am not speaking rhetorically. I am speaking factually. I literally did not commit the acts I am accused of." "All right, kid. What's your story?" I explained my situation with chronological and factual precision. David listened with an increasingly confused expression. "Man, you talk weird, like super formal, and you rock back and forth when you speak. I have autism spectrum disorder. My communication patterns and self-regulating behaviors are neurologically atypical." "Autistic," he repeated slowly, like Rain Man. "That is a grossly simplified cinematic representation of a complex neurological spectrum. But yes, there are superficial similarities." David laughed again. "Man, you're gonna have problems in here if you keep talking like that." He was correct. During the first 3 days, other inmates constantly tested me. "Hey, professor, look at the robot, talk normal, man." I tried to explain that I was talking normally for me, but that only made the teasing worse. "Chen, you're weird as hell," another inmate, Williams, told me during recreation. "What kind of guy counts his steps when he walks?" "I count steps to maintain spatial orientation and reduce anxiety through predictable numerical patterns." "You're crazy, man." Meals were especially difficult. The noise in the cafeteria, about 80 decibels of simultaneous conversations. Metal trays and utensils clattering, chairs scraping across the floor. Food with unfamiliar textures, excessive seasoning. Combinations that violated my sensory preferences organized over 19 years. I only ate the components I could tolerate: white bread, milk, fruit when available. I lost 10 pounds in the first week. Sleep was nearly impossible. David snored irregularly, at 40 to 60 decibels. The lights never fully went out. Constant nighttime noises. Guards walking, doors opening and closing, other inmates talking, coughing, moving. I developed a nervous tic of rubbing my hands repeatedly, a self-regulation movement that helped process sensory stress, but created skin sores after a few days. "Chen, you gotta quit that shit," David said on the fourth night. "You rub your hands all night. It's making me nervous." "Sorry, it's an involuntary neurological self-regulation behavior. I can try to suppress it, but that will increase my overall anxiety. Man, you need to learn how to talk like a normal person, if you want to survive here." But I didn't know how to talk like a normal person. I only knew how to talk like Marcus.
Watching my son being taken away in handcuffs was like watching part of my soul being ripped out and trampled. During the first 2 days after his arrest, I couldn't eat, sleep, or function at even the most basic level. I called the school and said I was sick. Technically, it wasn't a lie. I called every lawyer in Salem listed in the Yellow Pages and online. Most told me they had no experience with cases involving autistic people. One literally said, "Ma'am, your son sounds intelligent. He'll be able to explain himself." They didn't understand. Marcus is extraordinarily intelligent in specific areas, but under extreme social pressure. Especially in situations with implications he can't intuitively process, he is as lost as a small child. It was my sister Linda, from Portland, who gave me the only useful clue. "Sarah, you need someone who understands autism, not just criminal law." She referred me to Jennifer Morrison. Yes, the same last name as the detective, but no relation. Jennifer was a specialist in disability rights and had worked on similar cases in Portland and Eugene. Our first meeting was in a cafe in downtown Salem. Jennifer Morrison was a woman in her mid-40s, with a kind but determined expression, and a folder full of documents on cases involving neurodivergent people in the criminal justice system. "Sarah, I need to be completely honest with you from the beginning," she said, sipping black coffee from a plain white cup. "The American criminal justice system was not designed to understand or accommodate neurodivergent people. Autistic behaviors are often interpreted as suspicious, dishonest, or dangerous by jurors, police officers, and even judges who lack proper education about autism." "But he's completely innocent," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay composed. "I absolutely believe you. I've seen dozens of similar cases. Autistic young men arrested because their answers to questions are too detailed, too precise, or because they notice things neurotypical people wouldn't. The problem is we have to prove innocence to a system that has already interpreted difference as guilt." Jennifer explained the statistics. People with developmental disabilities are 7 times more likely to interact with the criminal justice system, not because they commit more crimes, but because their behaviors are misinterpreted. "What can we do?" "First, we document Marcus's autism extensively. Medical reports, school records, witnesses who can testify to his typical behavioral patterns. Second, we independently investigate this disappearance. If Jennifer Walsh ran away voluntarily, there's evidence the police may not be looking for." Over the next 2 weeks, Jennifer worked 12 to 14 hours a day on the case. She hired a private investigator, collected statements from Marcus's teachers, and documented his routines through surveillance cameras from local businesses. Meanwhile, she visited Marcus every day she was allowed. He was visibly deteriorating: weight loss, deep dark circles under his eyes, new nervous tics he had never shown before. "Mom, when can I come home? he asked at every visit, like a lost child. Soon, my love. Jennifer is working very hard to fix this. But why is it taking so long? If I didn't do anything wrong, shouldn't it be simple to prove my innocence? How could I explain to my 19-year-old son that the world isn't logical, that justice isn't automatic, that being different, even when innocent, is sometimes enough to be punished? The system is complicated, Marcus, but we'll fix it. I don't like complicated, he said, rocking back and forth in his familiar motion. I like logical. I know, my love. I know. It was during the third week that Jennifer came to my workplace with urgent news. I was teaching 8th grade algebra when she appeared in the doorway with an expression I couldn't immediately interpret. Sarah, I need to speak with you. It's important. I asked my assistant to cover the class and stepped into the hallway. What happened? Is Marcus okay? Marcus is fine. But we have news about Jennifer Walsh. My heart raced. She's alive. We found her in Portland, living with her boyfriend. The relief was so overwhelming that my legs nearly gave out. I had to lean against the wall for support. Then Marcus will be released immediately. Jennifer hesitated, and I saw in her expression that there were complications. Sarah, there's a problem. The district attorney's office is resisting dropping the charges. What do you mean? If Jennifer is alive and well, and confirmed she left voluntarily. District Attorney James Patterson invested significant political capital in this case. There was media coverage, promises to the community about solving the crime quickly. Admitting public error would be embarrassing. They're going to keep my son in prison to save face. They're trying to restructure the charges. Now they're suggesting Marcus may have been involved in planning the escape, based on his detailed knowledge about Jennifer. I felt rage explode inside me like nothing I'd ever felt in my life. Jennifer, they're going to destroy my son's life to protect their pride. That is exactly what they're trying to do. But now we have something we didn't have before. Jennifer Walsh herself as a defense witness.
27 years of practicing law had taught me that truth is rarely simple, but in this case, it was crystal clear. Marcus Chin was innocent. The challenge wasn't proving his innocence, it was making a system built for neurotypical people understand and accept his innocence. My parallel investigation began with a fundamental question the police apparently never asked. If Jennifer Walsh disappeared voluntarily, who might she have been with? I hired Rebecca Santos, a private investigator with 15 years of experience in missing persons cases. Rebecca had a methodological approach I appreciated: data, evidence, behavioral patterns. Jennifer, Rebecca told me in our first meeting, the local police focused on Marcus because he had detailed information about the girl. But if we look logically, someone planning a kidnapping doesn't voluntarily share specific information about the victim with the police. Exactly. And if we look at Marcus's profile, autistic, routine-driven, brutally honest, he is literally incapable of the kind of social manipulation crimes like this require. Rebecca dug into Jennifer Walsh's social media, quietly interviewed classmates, and mapped her movement patterns in the months leading up to her disappearance. Jennifer had a boyfriend, Rebecca discovered in the second week. Tyler Morrison, no relation to the detective. 20 years old, from Dallas, Oregon. Her parents strongly disapproved of the relationship. Why? Tyler had dropped out of high school, worked odd jobs, and had a history of minor drug-related infractions. Jennifer's parents forbade her from seeing him. And then? They kept meeting secretly. Jennifer lied to her parents about where she was going. Tyler only came to Salem on weekends. And here's the interesting part, Marcus Chen never altered his weekend routines. His documented schedule shows he spent Saturdays and Sundays at home reorganizing his books, studying, and doing household activities. The pattern emerged clearly. Marcus observed Jennifer Walsh during her weekday routines but had no exposure to her meetings with Tyler, which happened exclusively on weekends. So the argument Marcus saw on Thursday. Most likely Jennifer and Tyler discussing the escape plans. Rebecca found records of Tyler searching for cheap apartments in Portland the week before the disappearance. Finding Jennifer Walsh in Portland took 12 more days of intensive investigation. She was living with Tyler in a one-bedroom apartment in the Southeast District, working part-time at a coffee shop, trying to get her GED. When Rebecca finally located and spoke with Jennifer, the truth was exactly what we suspected. "My parents hated Tyler," Jennifer explained during our recorded interview. "They said they'd send me to boarding school if I kept seeing him. So we decided to run away until I turned 18 in September." "Jennifer, do you know Marcus Chen?" "I know him by sight. He always walks the same routes at the same times. Everyone at school knows who he is, the autistic kid who's super smart but kind of different." "Have you ever spoken to him?" "Never. I always thought he seemed kind, but we never interacted. He always looked like he was in his own world." "Did you know he was arrested in connection with your disappearance?" Jennifer looked visibly shocked. "What? Why?" "He had nothing to do with it." "Because he gave detailed information about you when the police asked, and because he saw you arguing with Tyler on the Thursday before you ran away." "But he just answered their questions?" "And he was right about the argument. Tyler and I were finalizing our plans." "But how does that make him a suspect?" It was a question with no logical answer.
Jennifer Walsh came back to Salem on a Thursday in April, exactly 31 days after Marcus's arrest. I expected her presence to result in my son's immediate release. Naive of me. District Attorney Patterson called a meeting at his office. Present were, himself, Detective Morrison, Jennifer Morrison, our attorney, me, and Jennifer Walsh with her parents. Jennifer Walsh looked smaller in person than I had imagined. Teenager who had made an impulsive decision and inadvertently destroyed my son's life in the process. "Ms. Walsh," Patterson began, "can you confirm that you left Salem voluntarily?" "Yes, sir. Tyler and I ran away to Portland because my parents didn't approve of our relationship." "And did Marcus Chen have any part in your plan to run away?" "No, sir. I don't even know him personally. We've never spoken. But you were aware that he regularly watched you." Jennifer Morrison, our attorney, cut in. "Objection. The question assumes stalking behavior when the evidence shows only that Marcus followed daily routines that visually intersected with Jennifer's." "Ms. Walsh," Patterson continued, ignoring the objection, "did you feel uncomfortable with the attention Marcus gave you?" Honestly, I never thought much about it. He always seemed harmless. Just different. Different how? Like, he always followed the same patterns, same places, same times. My friend Emma said he probably had autism, or something like that." Patterson leaned forward. "Do you consider it possible Marcus had developed an obsessive fixation on you?" I felt my anger rising. "Mr. Patterson, my son has not developed a fixation on anyone. He observes patterns of all people in his environment as part of his neurological functioning. Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, mothers often fail to recognize problematic behaviors in their children." "Mr. Patterson," Jennifer Morrison interjected, "what exactly are you trying to establish?" Jennifer Walsh is here, alive and well, confirming that she left voluntarily. There was no crime. There is no victim. What is the legal basis for maintaining these charges? The legal basis, Patterson replied, is that we have a young man who demonstrated anomalous knowledge about a minor, who watched her obsessively, and who may have encouraged or facilitated her decision to run away. That's ridiculous, Jennifer Walsh said, speaking with real assertiveness for the first time. He didn't encourage anything. I didn't even know he existed until you told me he'd been arrested. Ms. Walsh, is it possible Marcus tried to communicate with you in ways you didn't notice? Perhaps indirectly. No, I already said, we never interacted. Jennifer Walsh's parents, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Walsh, a middle-aged man, radiating discomfort, broke in. Mr. Patterson, he said, we want Jennifer to come home and resume her studies. We don't want to see an innocent boy punished for our daughter's mistakes. Mr. Walsh, I understand, but... No, Mr. Walsh cut him off. No, but... Our daughter ran away with her boyfriend. That was her decision. The autistic boy had nothing to do with it. Release him. Mrs. Walsh nodded firmly. We've already caused enough trauma to this family. This ends now. Patterson looked irritated. His narrative was publicly unraveling. I'll consult with my team, he said finally. 3 days later, Jennifer Morrison got a call. The charges against Marcus would be reduced from involvement in disappearance to disturbing behavior. A lesser charge that would result in probation instead of prison but would still permanently stain Marcus's record. They're trying to save face, Jennifer explained to me. Admitting total error would mean admitting incompetence. And if we refuse the deal, then we go to trial. And honestly, Sarah, I think we can win.
34 days in Marion County Jail ended on a Monday when I was told I had been released on bail to await trial. Bail paid by my mother using our house as collateral, our 3-bedroom home bought when I was 12. Valued at $287,000 according to the latest public records. Coming home after a month of sensory deprivation was both relief and overload. My familiar bed, my books organized by Dewey Decimal System, my desk positioned to optimize natural light tall, exactly as I'd left them, but I was neurologically different. I had developed hypervigilance toward external noises. Any unexpected sound, a passing car, a barking dog, a ringing phone instantly spiked my anxiety to levels that required 10 to 15 minutes of self-regulation to return to baseline. I also developed an aversion to enclosed spaces without a visible exit, something I had never experienced before. Supermarkets, libraries, even my own bedroom sometimes triggered claustrophobic sensations that only eased when I stood near an open door. Marcus, my mother said at our first dinner back, you seem different. Neurological trauma permanently alters certain synaptic connections, I replied with scientific precision, the way I process complex emotional experiences. Specifically, hyperactivation of the amygdala results in elevated fight or flight responses to previously neutral stimuli. She began to cry tears I classified as Category 2. Relief mixed with sadness. My smart boy, she said. We'll get through this together. The trial was set for September, 5 months after my initial arrest. Jennifer Morrison spent that time building our defense with extensive documentation, medical records confirming my autism, teacher testimonies about my consistent behavioral patterns, security camera analyses confirming my routines, and expert testimony on autism. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a neuropsychologist specializing in autism spectrum disorders, was our main expert witness. She had evaluated me extensively during the preparation months. Marcus Chen presents with high-functioning autism with typical characteristics: atypical sensory processing, need for structured routines, literal and direct communication, hyperfocus on specific areas of interest, and detailed observation of environmental patterns. Dr. Rodriguez explained to the jury, people with this neurological configuration often notice and memorize details. Neurotypical individuals overlook. This does not indicate romantic interest or obsession, it's simply how their brains process environmental information. Prosecutor Patterson tried to argue that my detailed knowledge of Jennifer Walsh indicated obsessive fixation. Dr. Rodriguez, he asked during cross-examination, isn't it true that autistic individuals can develop obsessions with specific people? Some autistic individuals do develop intense interests in specific topics or activities. But in Marcus's case, it's different. He demonstrates the same level of detailed observation for everyone in his routine environment. There is no evidence of specific fixation on Jennifer Walsh. But the level of detail he memorized about her, it is consistent with his general neurological pattern. Marcus can tell you similar details about the local librarian, specific bus drivers, and store clerks he regularly encounters. His mind works like a high-definition camera. It records everything, not selectively. Jennifer Walsh testified in my defense. Marcus never tried to talk to me, she told the court, looking directly at the jury. He never followed me beyond his normal routes. He never made me feel uncomfortable or threatened. I didn't even know he was paying attention to me until you told me. Ms. Walsh, my attorney asked, how did you find out Marcus had been arrested? When the police found me in Portland and told me, I was shocked. I thought, why would they arrest him? He's just a quiet kid who always walks the same places. And you can confirm Marcus had absolutely no part in your decision to run away. None. He didn't even know Tyler existed, didn't know about our plans, never tried to talk to me about anything. The only thing he did was answer the police honestly when they asked about me. Prosecutor Patterson made one last attempt during his cross-examination of Jennifer. Ms. Walsh, don't you think it's possible Marcus subconsciously influenced your decision through his constant presence? Jennifer looked at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. Mr. Patterson, with all due respect, that makes no sense. Marcus followed his routine. I followed mine. Sometimes we were on the same bus, or in the same public area. That's normal. How would that influence my decision to run away with my boyfriend? When it was my turn to testify, I felt extreme anxiety. Courtrooms are sensory hostile environments. Harsh fluorescent lights. Multiple simultaneous conversations. Uncomfortable chair textures. Complex social formality that challenges my interpersonal navigation. Marcus, my attorney Jennifer Morrison asked, can you explain to the jury why you observe and memorize details about people in your environment? It is involuntary neurological processing, I replied, focusing on the area between her eyes and nose, a technique that simulates eye contact without the sensory discomfort. My autistic brain processes visual information in hyperfocused ways. I observe patterns because patterns help me navigate complex social environments and detect changes that may represent threats or opportunities. Did you develop a romantic interest in Jennifer Walsh? No. Romantic interest requires specific emotional and physical attraction. My observation of Jennifer Walsh was purely categorical. She was part of my routine environment, so my brain recorded information about her the same way it records information about others. Marcus, did you lie to the police? No. Lying requires conscious creation of false information. I answered every question with maximum factual accuracy based on my memory and observation. During cross-examination, Patterson tried to confuse me with complex questions about my motivations and feelings autistic people often struggle to articulate. Marcus, didn't you think it was strange to know so many details about a girl you never spoke to? I would not classify it as strange. I would classify it as neurologically typical for me. The word strange implies judgment based on neurotypical social norms, which do not apply to my mental processing. Didn't you consider your observation invasive? Invasive implies intentional violation of privacy. All my observations occurred in public spaces where Jennifer Walsh was voluntarily present. I did not seek private or restricted information about her. But you admit your behavior was different from normal. My behavior was normal for me. Normal is a relative social construct, not an absolute standard. Patterson grew visibly frustrated with my literal answers that didn't fit his narrative. Jennifer Morrison's closing argument was brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case represents something more fundamental than Marcus Chen's guilt or innocence. It represents our society's ability to distinguish between difference and dangerousness. Marcus Chen is different. He processes the world uniquely, notices details others overlook, communicates with literal precision that sometimes seems odd. But different is not synonymous with dangerous. The evidence clearly shows Jennifer Walsh left voluntarily with her boyfriend. No crime occurred. There was no victim. Marcus's only crime was answering the police honestly about something he observed. If we deem guilt based simply on being different, on processing information atypically, on being autistic, then we set a dangerous precedent where neurodivergence itself becomes criminalized. Marcus Chen is innocent not only of the specific charges, but of the broader implication that being autistic is suspicious. I ask you to see beyond difference and recognize the truth. He is a gentle young man who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose only fault was being exactly who he is. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes and 16 seconds. Long enough for me to count. 2,836 stripes on the wallpaper of the waiting room where we sat for the verdict. When we returned to the courtroom, the jury foreman, Mr. Michael Chen, no family relation, just a coincidence of surname, stood up to read the verdict. In the case of the State of Oregon versus Marcus Chen, on the charges of disruptive behavior related to the disappearance of Jennifer Walsh, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. My mother began to cry. Category 1 tears, pure relief and joy. Jennifer Morrison smiled and shook my hand. I felt empty at first. Not relief, not joy, just the absence of the constant anxiety I had carried for 5 months and 14 days. Marcus Chen, the judge said, "You are free to go." The court apologizes for the trauma this misguided case may have caused. Judicial apologies are insufficient to repair neurological harm, but I appreciated the gesture. We left the courthouse to a small crowd of local reporters. Apparently, my case had become a regional symbol for issues surrounding autism and the criminal justice system. Marcus, how do you feel about your acquittal? A reporter asked. I feel logically satisfied with the correction of a systemic error, but neurologically I am still processing the effects of prolonged trauma. I replied with my characteristic honesty. Do you have a message for other autistic people who might face similar misunderstandings? I paused to process the question. It was an opportunity to articulate something important. Autism is not a choice. It is a neurological configuration. We cannot change how our brains work, but society can learn to interpret difference as diversity, not as threat.
The 6 months that followed were months of careful rebuilding. Marcus was clearly traumatized, a word he preferred to upset or sad, because it was neurologically more precise. We found Dr. Lisa Chen, another coincidence of surname, a psychologist specializing in trauma and autism. Marcus initially resisted therapy. "Mom, my problem isn't internal. My problem was systemic, a judicial error based on misunderstanding autism. Marcus, even when problems are external, they create internal impacts that need to be processed." Dr. Chen used modified cognitive behavioral approaches for autistic people. Instead of exploring feelings directly, she helped Marcus map logical connections between traumatic experiences and neurological responses. "Marcus," she explained, "your brain developed safety associations with certain environments and routines. The trauma disrupted those associations. We need to rebuild them gradually." Slowly, Marcus returned to his walks. First, 5-minute routes around the block. Then, 10 minutes. Eventually, he resumed his full route to the library, but now carried an identification card explaining his autism, a precaution for future police interactions. During this recovery period, we decided to sue the city of Salem for unlawful imprisonment and violation of civil rights. Not for the money, though financial compensation was important, but for systemic change. Sarah, Jennifer Morrison told me, "This type of lawsuit can take years and be emotionally exhausting. Are you sure? If we don't fight, this will happen to another family. Another autistic young man will be arrested for being different." The civil case revealed troubling patterns within the Salem Police Department. Lack of training on neurodivergence, pressure to close cases quickly, and implicit bias about suspicious behavior. Detective Morrison was reassigned to administrative duties, not as official punishment, but as an implicit acknowledgement that his investigative techniques were inadequate for cases involving vulnerable individuals. The final settlement included $350,000 in compensation, but more importantly, mandatory neurodivergence training for all Salem police officers, new protocols for interrogating autistic individuals, and funding for autism awareness programs in local schools. During the settlement negotiations, Marcus made a decision that surprised me. "Mom, I want to study law." "Why?" "Because I want to understand the system that almost destroyed me. And I want to change it so others like me don't go through what I did." Marcus had always shown interest in science and mathematics. Law was completely new territory. "Marcus, law involves a lot of social interaction, negotiation, interpretation of nuances." "Exactly. Areas where autistic people traditionally have disadvantages. But maybe we need lawyers who think differently, who see patterns others miss, who don't accept injustice as just the way things are." He applied to Willamette University College of Law, the very city where he had nearly lost his freedom. His LSAT score was perfect, 180.
3 years after my acquittal, I am in my second year of law school. My specialization is civil rights, with a specific focus on neurodivergence and criminal justice. Law school was a challenging adaptation. The Socratic method, a system where professors ask surprise questions to students during class, created intense anxiety at first. I had to develop strategies. Always sit in the third row, complete view of the room, but not too close to avoid being singled out. Prepare extensively for all readings, and practice verbal responses in advance. My classmates initially considered me strange, a familiar pattern throughout my life, but as I consistently demonstrated superior academic performance, especially in analyzing complex cases and identifying obscure precedents, I earned reluctant respect. Professor Williams, who teaches constitutional law, told me after a class, "Marcus, you see legal connections that escape typical students. Your brain processes information uniquely, and that is an advantage in this profession." My first practical experience came through the university's legal clinic, representing low-income individuals in civil rights cases. My first case, a 16-year-old autistic boy arrested for suspicious behavior in a store. Daniel Martinez, diagnosed with Asperger's at age 8, was arrested because he was observing products too carefully in an electronics store. For Daniel, examining technical specifications of electronic devices was a typical special interest. For the store's security guard, it looked like the behavior of a potential thief. "Daniel," I asked during our first meeting, "can you explain exactly what you were doing in the store?" "I was comparing tablet specifications, processors, RAM, storage capacity, screen quality. I need to find a device optimized for my graphic design software within a $400 budget." "How long did you examine the products?" "Approximately 43 minutes. The time needed to adequately evaluate 12 different models." The pattern was identical to my own case. Typical autistic behavior interpreted as suspicious by people who didn't understand neurodivergence. I represented Daniel pro bono, using strategies Jennifer Morrison had developed in my case. We extensively documented his autism, educated the prosecutor about typical autistic behavior, and succeeded in having all charges dropped. "Marcus," Daniel told me after the resolution, "thank you for understanding. Most people don't." "I understand because I am like you," I replied. "And now I am learning how to use the legal system to protect people like us." During my third year, I began working part-time at Jennifer Morrison's law firm, which had established a practice specializing in disability rights cases. "Marcus," she told me, "you are becoming exactly the kind of lawyer the system needs. Someone who understands firsthand the complexities of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world." My thesis was titled, "Neurodivergence and Due Process: The Necessary Reform of the American Criminal Justice System." I analyzed 247 cases of autistic individuals in the criminal system, identified systemic patterns of discrimination, and proposed specific legislative reforms. Jennifer Walsh reached out to me during my final year of law school. She had graduated high school and was studying psychology at Portland State University, focusing on autism. "Marcus," she said when we met at a cafe in downtown Salem, the same cafe where my mother had met Jennifer Morrison years before, "I wanted to apologize to you in person for what you went through. Jennifer, you did nothing wrong. You exercised personal autonomy in making decisions about your own life. The system failed to interpret the situation correctly. But if I hadn't run away like that, if you hadn't run, I still would have been a vulnerable autistic youth subject to systemic misinterpretation. The problem wasn't your specific action. It was the system's lack of understanding of autism." She told me my experience had motivated her to change her academic path. "I want to work with autistic people," she said. "I want to help families, educate professionals, do research." What happened to you made me realize how many people face similar misunderstandings. Today, 5 years after my arrest, I work as a lawyer specializing in neurodivergent rights. My office is exactly 847 meters from the library where I used to study, a distance I still count during my morning walks, which I resumed fully 2 years ago. I represent autistic people, people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, people with Tourette's, any individual whose neurological differences have led to discrimination or legal misunderstandings. My most recent case, an autistic teacher fired because her teaching methods were too rigid. In reality, she had developed structured approaches that especially benefited neurodivergent students. But administrators interpreted structure as inflexibility. "Marcus," she told me, "they said I couldn't connect emotionally with students. But my autistic students love me because they finally have a teacher who understands how they learn." I secured full restitution for her, plus mandatory neurodivergence training for all school administrators. I also work in public policy. I helped draft state legislation requiring autism training for police officers in Oregon. The Marcus Chen Act, name wasn't my idea, but I didn't protest, now serves as a model for other states. I regularly give lectures in schools, police academies, and law schools. My first lecture was terrifying. 200 people staring at me simultaneously. A social performance expectation challenging all my neurological skills. But I discovered that my blunt honesty about autism resonates uniquely with audiences. Being autistic, I say in a typical lecture, is not a tragedy to overcome or a condition to cure. It is a different way of processing reality. Sometimes it's a disadvantage. In complex social situations, sensory hostile environments, or contexts requiring non-literal communication. But sometimes it's an advantage. In detailed analysis, pattern recognition, systematic logical thinking. The problem is not autism itself. The problem is a world designed exclusively for neurotypical people, interpreting difference as defect. My mother, now 52, has become a recognized special education activist. She stopped teaching math to work on awareness programs about neurodivergence in Oregon public schools. "Marcus taught me," she says in her own lectures, "that my role as a mother was not to fix him to fit the world. It was to help him find his place while advocating for the world to become more inclusive." Detective Morrison retired early. We never spoke after the trial. But I heard through colleagues that he occasionally cites my case as an example of the importance of understanding the people he interrogates. Dr. Lisa Chen, my therapist, continues to work with me monthly, not because I still need to process trauma, but because social and professional navigation remains a challenge that benefits from structured support. "Marcus," she recently told me, "you transformed a traumatic experience into a life purpose. That is the most powerful form of healing there is." Every Tuesday at 10:47 a.m., the exact time of my arrest 5 years ago, I pause my current activity and reflect for 60 seconds, not on the injustice I suffered, but on the people who still need a voice. Last week, I received an email from the mother of an autistic teen in Texas, arrested for threatening behavior that consisted of self-regulatory movements during a police interaction. "Mr. Chen," she wrote. I read about your case online. My son is going through what you went through. Could you help us? I replied immediately, yes. Let's solve this together. Because this is my mission now. Not just surviving the system that nearly destroyed me, but transforming it so others like me can exist without fear of being criminalized for being exactly who they are. Today is March 15th. Exactly 6 years since my arrest. I am sitting at the same table in the Salem Public Library where I used to study before my life changed permanently. Table 14, third table in the second row, 1.2 meters from the east window. But today, I am not reading about criminal justice systems, as I did that traumatic March. I am reviewing the manuscript of the book I wrote. The Silence That Screams, Autism, Justice, and the Fight for Understanding. The book documents my experience but, more importantly, provides practical guidance for families, lawyers, police officers, and educators on recognizing and supporting neurodivergent people within the legal system. The editor at University of Oregon Press told me there is already interest from universities to use the book as a textbook in criminology and psychology courses. There are also discussions about adapting it into a documentary. Marcus, my mother said to me at dinner yesterday, you took something terrible that happened to you and turned it into strength for the greater good. Transformation is a continuous process, I replied. There is still much work to do. Statistically, individuals with developmental disabilities are still 7 times more likely to interact with the criminal justice system. My case set an important precedent in Oregon, but there are 49 other states where autistic youth still face systemic discrimination. Next year, I will begin a doctoral program in law, focusing on public policy related to neurodivergence. My goal is to develop national legal frameworks that protect people like me from misinterpretation and discrimination. Jennifer Walsh, now 23, completed a master's in clinical psychology, specializing in autism. We occasionally collaborate on cases where autistic youth face legal challenges due to misunderstandings. Marcus, she told me last week, sometimes I think our story, you being arrested, me running away, was necessary to raise awareness about these issues. Individual narratives often catalyze systemic change, I agreed. But I would have preferred that none of us endured trauma to create that awareness. Me too. But since we did, at least we are using the experience constructively. Over these 6 years, I have received hundreds of emails from autistic people and families sharing similar experiences. Young people arrested for strange behavior, autistic adults misinterpreted by police, children suspended from school due to neurological differences. Every email reinforces the importance of the work I chose. My daily routine now includes new elements but maintains the structure my autistic brain requires. 6:47 a.m. Wake up. 7:15 a.m. Coffee with my mother. 8:30 a.m. Walk to office. Exactly 1,847 meters from home. 9 a.m. - 5 p.m. Legal work. 6 p.m. Dinner. 7:30 to 9 p.m. Reading or writing. 9:45 p.m. Prepare for sleep. But now my routine also includes monthly lectures at various institutions, pro bono consulting for families facing discrimination, legislative work to improve legal protections for neurodivergent people. Last week, I spoke to 300 cadets at the Oregon Police Academy. My message was simple. when you encounter a person whose behavior seems strange or suspicious, ask this question: is this behavior dangerous or just different? Difference is not a crime. Autism is not evidence of guilt. All people, neurotypical and neurodivergent, deserve to be treated with dignity and understanding. A cadet approached me after the talk. "Mr. Chen, my younger brother is autistic. After hearing your lecture, I better understand how to protect people like him when I become a police officer." "That is exactly the change we hope to create," I replied. Today, at 10:47 a.m., my weekly moment of reflection, I think about the 19-year-old boy I was 6 years ago, confused, scared, and nearly destroyed for being exactly who he was. That boy could not have imagined that his terrible experience would become a catalyst for meaningful change, that his trauma would turn into purpose, that his forced silence would eventually become a powerful voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. My name is Marcus Chen. I am 25 years old. I am autistic, lawyer, activist, author, and survivor of a system that tried to break me but failed. My silence became a scream. My difference became strength. My vulnerability became advocacy. And this is only the first story I have to tell. My journey is not unique. Right now, in cities across the country, neurodivergent youth face discrimination, misunderstandings, and similar injustices. Autistic people, people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, and those with neurological differences are criminalized simply for existing in a world not designed for them. If this story moved you deeply, there are transformative actions you can take now. First, like and subscribe to this channel. Every subscription amplifies our ability to tell stories that need to be heard. Activate the bell. Marginalized voices need to be heard. And your engagement ensures we continue telling these essential stories. Second, share widely. This story must reach parents of neurodivergent children, educators, police officers, lawyers, legislators, anyone with the power to create change. Your sharing can save a young person from unnecessary trauma, educate professionals about neurodivergence, and inspire families to fight for justice. Third, use your voice in the comments. Are you neurodivergent? Do you know someone who is? Have you witnessed discrimination based on neurological differences? What specific changes would you like to see in society? Your comments create a support community and generate ideas for concrete action. Being different is not a crime. Being autistic is not evidence of danger. Having a brain that works uniquely is neurological diversity that enriches our society. If you reached the end of this story, thank you for taking the time to understand the experience of a neurodivergent person. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being willing to see the world through a different perspective. Until the next video, remember, in a world that constantly tries to make us the same, being different is an act of courage. And courage, when combined with justice, can change the world.